Nitin, thank you so much, first of all, for all the support that you've provided us. I know Justin's had a great time, my co founder and CEO, being on your various shows talking about our favorite topic these days, which is product marketing. So, just wanted to acknowledge you there and thank you for being one of the thought leaders in this space. I've been following your work now for quite a few months as I've been a student of product marketing, have never held the role or really haven't dived deep into it until the last couple years. So I've been learning from individuals like yourself. So, so thank you for that. Why don't we take a quick second just to kind of give us a quick career journey or overview?
Absolutely. So my name is Nitin Kartik again. I'm currently Director of Product Marketing at Carbine. A couple of interesting things about me, George. I have my MBA from the University of Chicago. I got my master's from
Awesome.
Stanford
By the way,
University.
shout out to University of Chicago. Phenomenal school, right?
There you go. Yes, that's right. Got to represent the Booth School of
Absolutely.
Business. Um, And then my master's I got from Stanford University. Another fun fact, George, I've been featured as a guest on BBC TV, so do check out my LinkedIn profile for folks in the audience. You can check out a fun, quick interview that I had with them. In terms of my work experience, George, I've been with various different industries. I've been in the media space with SiriusXM. I've been in the automotive space with TomTom. I've been in e-commerce with Amazon. I've been with healthcare with a company called PPD. I've been in public safety as well with companies like Rapid SOS and now with Carbine. And so I've got experience across different industries. Some of the achievements I'm really proud of that I've helped my organizations achieve is I've helped grow our revenues by 90% year over year. I've helped deliver record-breaking acquisition. And I've also won the Imagine and Invent Before They Ask award, among other achievements. So really, really humbled for the opportunity to serve my organizations. As a product marketer, George, I find that it gives me a very unique vantage point. I like to think of myself like I'm in the airport control room and I'm in the control tower. I'm watching all the planes land and take off. I got to work with all different departments. And so I feel like I'm in the middle of the action. And that's one thing that gets me up every morning. So to all the product marketers out there, hats off to everything you guys are doing.
Absolutely. I love the air traffic control kind of analogy because as I've been learning about this function the last couple years, I've said to myself, holy smokes, like the product marketer is the conduit between so many organizations. And oftentimes that's not a easy challenge, right? Like you have to kind of figure out a lot of different things, not only strategically, but from the human perspective, right? Being able to develop those relationships. And sometimes when there's misalignment between this team and this team, how do you actually bring them together? And then, of course, all the positioning and messaging stuff. If you do have that misalignment from these, let's say in this case, two different stakeholders or teams, and then you have to develop the messaging and positioning for them while trying to figure out how to get them on the same page. That could be a challenge.
Yeah,
So
definitely. In fact, one thing I'll say to that, George, you, I think, hit a very good, interesting point there. There may be many folks in the audience who maybe didn't start off as product marketers, right? Maybe you started in a different role and then you came into product marketing. I would say look at that as an asset, right? George, as you said, you got to work in product marketing, you got to work with the product team, you got to work with the engineering team, you got to work with the marketing team, you got to work with the sales team, you got to work with the partnerships team. So maybe your background was in sales, right, before you came into product marketing. Maybe your background was in engineering. My background, I got my master's in electrical engineering. Okay, I'm an engineer by training. So the good news is when you talk with engineers and you have an engineering background, you have instant credibility and you also know their pain points, right? I've also done partnerships. So when I talk with a partnerships team, I understand
mhm.
their pain points. I've done business development. So when I talk with a sales or business development team, I understand their pain point. Bottom line, folks out there, if you have a background that is different than product marketing, don't think of that as a drawback. That is your strength.
Awesome. I think that's one of the things that I love about Justin, my co-founder, so much is that he started his career as a salesperson and then moved into product marketing. And so when we talk about that great topic about alignment, right? He really starts to be able to kind of make headway in that because he does understand, kind of the both worlds. But let's chat a little bit about the comparison and contrast between B2B, B2C, and B2G. And for the folks out there who are not familiar, business to business, business to consumer, and B2G, business to government. And given that you've had so much experience in that, any sort of nuances that really stand out to you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, George. And again, folks in the audience, right, you may be perhaps in one of these spaces, and maybe you're looking to pivot into the other space, right? So you're curious, hey, how does this work? So let me share my experience. I've been in all three, consumer, in B2B, and in government channels as well. First, I'll start with some of the similarities. In all of these, it's about relationship building, right? Think of it as a marathon, not a sprint. So don't try to do like a one and done, make sure that you're in it for the long haul. All of these involve data-driven insights. So collect whatever data you can. In the consumer space, there's a lot of data that's available. In the business space, maybe a little bit less. In the government space, it may be even more reduced, but there's always data. So always try to be data-driven in your decision making. And thirdly, the similarity is it generally is about trust and credibility. So make sure your branding, your thought leadership, and all the content that you put out there for your organization is on point in order to build your trust and credibility with your customer base. So
Mm,
those are some of the similarities. Let's talk about some of the differences, George. And I would look at these in a few different dimensions. First, the target audience, right? When you're talking about B2C, you're targeting individuals. When you're talking about B2B, these are major businesses or even startups. And then when you're talking about B2G, you're talking about government agencies. So that is one clear difference between these. Decision making is another dimension we can look at. In B2C, it is very short decision making cycle, and it's a very emotional decision making. People buy on impulse. With B2B, it tends to be longer sales cycles, and there tend to be multiple
mm,
stakeholders. You got to go through reviews and so on, committees. B2G is the longest. Okay, you got to go through all kinds of red tape and RFP. It's more complicated because oftentimes it's taxpayer money. So you want to make sure that they're doing their due diligence. Another dimension is relationship building. In B2C, it's mostly about branding and advertising. Make sure that your consumers understand your brand and what you stand for. In B2B, there's some of that, but you also have to do a lot of thought leadership because businesses, when they try to buy, they want to make sure that they are buying from an expert in what they do.
mm,
In B2G, it almost entirely is thought leadership, right? There's not as much help that we can get with advertising. Advertising helps a little bit, but ultimately B2G, they really want to go with a trusted and known quantity. And thought leadership really helps in that. In channels, in B2C, we use a lot of social media. We may use influencers. In B2B, trade shows become very important. And you also need to do content marketing. So put out white papers, one pagers, brochures, things like that. In B2G, trade shows become huge. In a lot of B2G agencies, trade shows are where you may get a lot of your most actionable leads and one-on-one meetings, right? You got to show up, you got to shake their hand, you got to, make sure that you're there and convince them that you'll be there for the long haul.
mm,
Messaging is another dimension where things are a little bit different. In B2C, we talk mainly about personal satisfaction, how they're going to enjoy the product, how it's going to complement their lifestyle. In B2B, we talk about how it can either help them make money or save money, right? Those are generally the dimensions. And in B2G, we talk about public value. Perhaps they serve the community, how this is going to help the community. And it's also going to, you're going to focus on how you comply with all the regulations and all
mm.
the rules that they have. So that's a quick rundown. Hopefully, from a high level, people get an idea as to B2B, B2C, and B2G, some of the similarities and differences.
I can't help but think about the messaging or the wording rather as you communicate these distinctions, particularly the B2G, right? Like public value and those sort of things. Very sort of like, I don't know, the words that come to mind are public affairs or political. sort of nuances there. So very interesting. Certainly a world that I want to learn more about. You know, as a PMM, we often get asked quite often the question about hitting my numbers, right? And if you were to think about some of the approaches that you would recommend to product marketers that they can really sort of think through when hitting that key number, any sort of maybe tactics or approaches that you would recommend?
Yeah, I think this is probably also another great question because a lot of the audience, right, we're right now during the middle of the year, and as we think through our check-ins, how we're doing against our targets, right, it's good to think about these metrics. So all of us have our numbers that we got to hit. Let me tell you a story of a situation where we were struggling to hit our numbers and some of the approaches that I took, and hopefully this will help the audience as well. There are many different channels that we can use in order to try and make our acquisition. If, let's say, you're talking about lead acquisition or customer acquisition, you have all these different channels. I had a situation, George, where we had our budget allocated almost equally across all various channels. Social media, we were even doing direct mail, we had some web advertising, all kinds of things. And I found that the 80-20 rule was playing out. In other words, 80% of our results were coming from 20% of our
Mm,
efforts, right? Some people call it the Pareto principle. So I said, okay, you know what? Let's take a look at this. Let's find the winning channels, double down on those, move budget into those, and essentially defund some of those channels that weren't working very well. It was a very risky move. A lot of people gave me a lot of heat. Oh, we've always done it this way. The moment people tell you we've always done it this way, that's when you
yeah,
know you're doing something right, okay?
exactly. Steve
So
Jobs would be happy, right?
there you go. He's probably turning in his grave right now. So I moved budget into some of those winning channels, and it actually paid off. We managed to deliver record-breaking acquisition.
Wow.
We didn't have any other campaigns in the company's history that were able to achieve that level of acquisition. The takeaway for the audience is don't be afraid to take risks,
Mm.
right? Look at the data, and it tells you a story, right? And combine that with your gut instinct. And if your gut says, you know what, I think this is really going to help us hit our numbers, go for it. And as long as your decision making is based on the data, your chances of victory are pretty high.
And one thing I would add to that to the audience, I never, ever, ever enjoy operating from a state of fear. So I think personally, I would enjoy or prefer taking a risk, doing something from a state of instinct and enjoy, right? That adventure versus not doing something because I'm afraid of it not working out in the way that I planned. So just a little tidbit there that I wanted to add. Um, you know, Nitin, I think a lot about retention, especially we've been talking a lot about that this I would say maybe the last 2 years since we've been going through all these very interesting cycles in SaaS, particularly down markets, et cetera, whatever you want to call it. So retention's been a big, big topic. From the perspective of a product marketer, how have you addressed optimizing retention?
Yeah, I think the earlier story I shared was about acquisition, and retention is the other side of the coin, right? You got to acquire your customers, and of course, you got to retain your customers. So yes, retention is another great question. And retention can be a challenge. In different organizations, there are different metrics. If you're talking about a SaaS product where you have maybe customers paying a monthly or annual subscription, you want to keep that subscription as long as possible. Many companies start with a free trial, especially with the product-led growth movement. Free trials are becoming very common. So you take the free trial and then you fall in love with the product and then you upsell and then you got to earn the business and retain them. This reminds me of a story where once I was part of a business that was a subscription product, and we had a lot of different free trials going. In fact, we tried playing with all kinds of, 1 month, two
Mm.
month, 3 month, and different, even like 6 month free trials. And we found that we were getting a lot of acquisition, but we were not getting much retention, right? People were taking the trial and then leaving. And so what I said was, okay, we need two things to happen here, okay, to find the ideal customer. We need people, one, who love our product. We were getting that. I mean, a lot of people were taking the trials. Second, we needed people who are willing to pay for the product, okay? And that was the part that we were missing. So I said, okay, we need to change things up a little bit. So I said, instead of the free trial campaigns, we will do a deeply discounted trial campaign, right? So you pay something on day one.
Mm,
And for the first one or X number of months, you pay a deeply discounted rate. And that was a win-win, right? The
mm,
customers benefited because they were getting a great deal. The company benefited because the people who never wanted to pay, they would not sign up.
mm.
Even if you give them a deep, deep, deep discount, they were like, hey, I'm not going to pay. Okay, thank you, sir. We don't need you. Okay. Um, and that helped us generate the right kind of customers to take the product, and it developed a 31% improvement in our customer retention.
Wow.
And so, this may not be right for everyone out there. I'm not saying don't do free trials. Okay, free trials are great, but look at your ideal customer profile. And if you're finding that there are a lot of people who are taking your trial but not converting, consider maybe at least from time to time, instead of having the free trial, to have a deeply discounted
Mm.
offer. So that would be another an arrow in your quiver, right?
Yeah.
That you can use to try and hit your retention numbers.
Yeah, one thing that I've seen, particularly with like enterprise organizations or when selling to enterprise organizations, is this paid pilot concept, right? Where they have, as a salesperson, I've gone out there and I've done that, where I've offered, all right, let's do a pilot at a reduced cost. Or maybe it's a third of the actual overall contract. Let's go through it. Let's say for 60 days or, whatever that time parameter is. And then if we hit specific milestones that we've set out to accomplish, then we pay the regular price, right? And so, for an enterprise organization, this is generally not an issue of finances, right? But of value and actually them spending the time, opportunity costs. So that really stood out to me.
Yeah.
Nitin, I wanted to ask you about the governments and selling to larger enterprises. Specifically, I mentioned that I wanted to learn a little bit more about selling to governments. How do you sell to governments? And I say large enterprises because I know, as we've talked about this in the past, kind of off camera, you've really spoken to the similarities between those governments and larger enterprises.
Yeah, and it's true, like large enterprises, they also have a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of regulation, especially if you're talking about healthcare or even automotive. Think about like all the challenges with self-driving cars, right? The technology is advancing, but when it causes accidents, people get hurt, you got to take that seriously, right? So there are a lot of regulations. So yes, large enterprises tend to behave a lot like government agencies in terms of bureaucracy. And here's one way to think of it, right? Let me maybe tell you a story where once I was with a company, we were targeting the automotive space, and the automotive space is very concentrated. So there are just a small number of large manufacturers, and in order to try and win business with them, you have to convince them that you are a thought leader in what you do. So it's not always the best product that necessarily wins, right? They have to be convinced that you really know what you're doing, you're an expert, you're going to be a trusted advisor to them, right? That's what you need to achieve. And so thought leadership can really help with that. So one thing that we did, this was actually at TomTom, the GPS company, we were working on real-time traffic services. And so we came up with the TomTom Traffic Index. We had access to hundreds of millions of devices collecting GPS data, so we knew a lot about traffic. So we came up with the TomTom Traffic Index, and we ranked cities in the world based on traffic congestion. In fact, for 1 year, we ranked Mexico City as one of the most congested cities in the world, the traffic capital of the world, Mexico City. And we came up with a full list. And this was very interesting, right? Like traffic, when we talk about it, is usually something we don't want to talk about, but now it becomes interesting. Hey, which was your city? Where were you ranked? The story became so popular, we were picked up by the BBC. And I did an interview with the BBC where I explained some of the analysis that we did. And a lot of people were watching, including our customers in the
Yeah.
automotive sector. And I wouldn't say it was all that, but that combined with other things that we did for thought leadership, and of course the hand-to-hand combat, trying to win the deal with them, convince them, visit their sites, and so on, we managed to close a $40 million deal
Wow.
with an automotive customer. So the lesson from this is sometimes we think of thought leadership as, how are we going to track that and how is that going to help? Especially if you're working with large enterprises, if you're working with government agencies, this is indispensable because especially the sales cycles are very long, right? It may be a year, maybe more than a year to make a deal. And so focus on your thought leadership. It is that thing that is always running in the background, always convincing your customers that you are the experts in what you're doing. So don't ignore thought leadership.
Well, Nitin, I wanted to cut to the BBC video real quick so the audience can see.
But let me bring in from New York Nitin Kartik, who's a traffic expert at TomTom, who actually drew up this travel index. And this is absolutely fascinating, just going through some of the data. But just answer, first of all, I mean, in the worst of the places, how much time are people actually wasting? Mexico City, which is top of the list, for example.
Absolutely. In fact, what's interesting, Matthew, is when you look around the world, people are wasting hundreds and hundreds of hours stuck in traffic. You mentioned Mexico City, which we declared as the traffic capital of the world, where people are wasting 227 hours every year sitting in traffic. Now, if you think about that and juxtapose it with a 40-hour work week, that is a month of work hours that people are stuck in traffic. Imagine if people had a month back in their lives, they could go take a vacation, they could go do something else. So we think that it's very important to provide such information, and the TomTom Traffic Index, which we release every year, using data that we collect from 500 million devices around the world. This can be smartphones, this can be connected cars, and this is really giving us an accurate picture, yeah.
It's an extraordinary amount of time when you put it like that, a month in your life. As I said, 19% it's jumped by, but not everywhere. Just explain what's going on, because that's quite a spike, but it's not on every continent, is it?
That's true. In fact, when we look around the world, Matthew, it actually changes. When we look at North America, traffic congestion was up only about 5% year over year. When we look at Europe, it was up about 9%. And when we look in Asia, it was up about 12%. Africa was up about 15%. Now, many people take the glass half full perspective that, traffic congestion is increasing and that's a bad news. At TomTom, we take the glass half full perspective, which is, hey, this is a sign of a growing world economy. In many of these places where traffic congestion is up, people are going back to work, unemployment is going down. And there are really two reasons that we see why some of these differences exist in different parts of the world. One is on the supply side in terms of infrastructure. The other is on the demand side in terms of people actually getting on the roads. On the supply side, infrastructure, we see that in the US, for example, there's $64 billion a year in spending on road transportation. Yep. That is more than, if you look at the OECD reports, more than the next 12 countries combined.
Well, that's sort of quite an optimistic way of looking at data that you yourself have collected. I'll come back to a couple of those points in a moment. You talked about infrastructure. Just in 30 seconds for us, can infrastructure ever keep pace with the sort of traffic numbers, congestion from your figures that seems to be just growing exponentially?
That's true, Matthew. In fact, when you look at it, it seems very staggering. Again, we at TomTom take the glass half full perspective, and we are very confident at TomTom that agencies and authorities will make the right choice, will make the smart choice, and lean on the private sector, companies like TomTom, to provide data to help build the right level of infrastructure. Gone are the days when you can have tremendous government spending on very expensive infrastructure, and we believe private sector solutions will be able to
Gone is our time. Nitin, there from New York.
Awesome. So you can see, again, amazing, right? BBC, one of the largest media entities in the world. So that was awesome. Well, thank you so much for just sharing this knowledge, sharing these stories, these very actionable stories with this insight. Let's talk a little bit about, as we wrap up here today, your shows, because you have Product Marketing Genius, Product Marketing Choices, Product Marketing School, and I know quite a few other ones. First of all, where could folks find this information or tune into the shows?
Yes, definitely. So, folks, I love talking about product marketing, and I love also hosting other product marketing experts. So, you're listening not just to me, but from other experts as well. So, connect with me on LinkedIn. Again, my name is Nitin Kartik, Nitin Kartik. You'll find me with the car emoji next to me, so that's me. And on LinkedIn, I share a lot of these shows. They're largely 2-minute videos. Some of them are a little bit longer, so we can become a little more substantive. I have shows Product Marketing School, Product Marketing Wisdom, Product Marketing Choices, Product Marketing Maestros, Product Marketing Genius. You will get your product marketing fix. I guarantee that. So hit me up on LinkedIn, send me a direct message, and would love to connect.
Awesome. Well, Nitin, have a great, great day, and thank you again.
Wonderful. Great to be with you, George. Thank you.